I am your host, the Working Class Guru, Shad Sullivan, a cattle rancher in the meatpacking industry or whatever industry that has to do with food. Recently went on a YouTube rant and talked about some of these very intense problems that our food industry is meeting right now in the midst of this coronavirus crisis. Millions of tons of food is being destroyed at the behest of a oligarchy of meat packing barons, and he calls them out on this and addresses it. Is there anything we can do about it? I'm going to go into that a little bit more. Shad Sullivan's rant and his recent interview on the Valuetainment podcast show, YouTube channel, whatever. But first, I am your host, the Working Class Guru, just here to offer some support to working class employed people around the world, people who otherwise, instead of being able to live in linear time, are infused inside of secular time, having day-to-day existence being more of a rat race, waking up to a screeching alarm clock, to sit into traffic, having time being just regimented and routined by a capitalist overlord who determines your life, your worth, your value through the exchange value of a predetermined wage, and how you as a human being are worth much more than a mere amount in your bank account. Your lifeblood, your soul, you're a special human of the cosmos, and you have worth that goes beyond this monetary system that is only made to allow a given class of entrepreneur people to gain any sort of who are the sole beneficiaries of the system, while the rest of us are basically picking at the scraps of their fallen from their dinner table. I don't mean to sound glib about that or to sound angry. I mean, it's just the way it is. And this Shad Sullivan, his rant is a detailing of the given state of our holy economy. Peace be upon it, because now we live in a system where the economy is God, money is God, capitalism is a religion. The wealthy people are saints, poor people are sinners, banks are churches, and we now have a massive depletion of our food supply, which is he says in this rant that we have a good food supply, but the problem is that these robber barons or whatever are these massive corporations that are running the meatpacking industry are demanding that massive amounts of this food be destroyed, liquidated. I mean, this is the way that capitalism functions. The lives of these animals is not as important as the endearing profit, or the food. Their meat is just going to be wasted, and there's a problem with that. He basically goes into detail about how these corporations have hijacked the opportunities of this industry in order to create essentially what could all be intensive purposes be like some sort of a monopoly, an oligarchy. I mean, Tim Pool talked about this recently in a podcast by Joe Rogan, that it wasn't that capitalism was going to save us from communism, but it just extended the stay of the free market until oligarchs eventually, all of the money and accumulation of the wealth became into fewer and fewer hands. And what we're seeing today is that these people, at the threat of losing the value of their income by fractions, they'd rather destroy and murder livestock once they're not being used for their meat. It's wasteful, and it's murder, and it's a sin against nature, against God, against humanity to murder these animals instead of using their meat and their bodies in order to feed others, and just for the betterment of a few people at the top who want to maintain their status, or at least their income. And this is the postmodern capitalist in all of his glory. There's no sensibility towards any sort of value system, no morality. God is dead, and there's nobody dictating any sort of a heraldic traditionalism to relegate them into a system that divulges a sense of responsibility. The government as an ecumenical order of arbitrage has failed, and instead their lobbyists are just these cahoots. They're in cahoots. What can I say? The government and the big businesses, there's nothing we can do about it. I'm sorry. Shad Sullivan went on this massive rant to call people out and to bring awareness to it, and I'm sorry, but there's nothing we're going to do about it. People more or less will... people have no power. Working class people in this country have very little power. The only power that we have is our buying power, and they're with the given status, the given climate of political upheaval, and people that can't get along between the Republicans and the Democrats, liberals and conservatives, pointing fingers, naming names, and the massive propaganda machine that the news industry is, the media industry is, fueling these awful ideologies that are continuously diluting the working class people from being able to identify themselves into a given tradition, into a given schema, to segregate themselves from the ideologies of the capitalist class, that they can't determine that their power comes from their collectivity, and thus they can't reach a collective consciousness in order to adequately fight the powers that are threatening these massive corporate powers, because the only power the working class people do is to vote. The only vote you really have is with your wallet, and by your particular ability to consume products. There's no massive grassroots movement that is mobilizing working class people enough to take responsibility, because of the climate of the ideologists who've woven the capitalist, individualist, free market determinism, social Darwinism into most of the conservatives and in the liberal side. I'll say it bluntly, is I think that the liberals are just as incapable of creating a collectivized working class person proletariat subject position to actively use as a springboard to leverage any sort of power for the working class in those regards. The inability to collectivize is the greatest hindrance to the sleeping giant of the sheer power that the working class could accomplish if it could realize its own identity in class and not be divided over stupid little quibs like gender and race and who has privilege, how much privilege, what unit of privilege do you have, and you're detailing me. Those are the things that are, despite all those, they're holding the working class people back from leveraging their own power, and it's for that reason that the wage gap, I'm not talking about the gender wage gap, that's just a liberal red herring to keep people's minds away from the real wage gap, which is even Thomas Piketty talks about the national income, lion's share of national income going to a smaller and smaller minority of the population. I'm not talking about minorities, okay? I'm talking about minority of the population, the barons, the oligarchs, the plutocrats who are propagating these insatiably illogical things like dumping gallons and gallons of thousands of gallons of milk that Shad Sullivan brings into that he talks about. And when he went on, I mainly got the gist of what he was talking about from valuetainment here. And what he says is like, the question is who controls the food supply? Think about that. The subsistence that every single human being needs is at the hands of these oligarchs. And what does that mean for society as a whole? For one, he even says it, 1.3 million people were in this industry, or at least 1.5 million businesses maybe, I'm not sure, 1.5 million people in the industry or businesses in 1979, and now it's went down to 70,000. It's slowly going down. Isn't that what Tim Pool talks about in that podcast with with Joe Rogan that the prolonging of capitalism doesn't it merely offsets the totalitarian overthrow of the democratic society. It only prolongs it until eventually the more and more the wealth begins to be accumulated into the hands of a smaller and smaller sect of people. And that's what Shad Sullivan is talking about, is that they're weeding out, these larger corporations are pushing out the smaller people who want to get in on the opportunities, the smaller companies. The trickle-down has ended. The trickle-down doesn't work anymore. Now it is, he even says it too, one of the things that scared me the most is they asked him, in Valuetainment, asked him, hey, how do you get into this industry? He says, you're either born into it or you inherit it. Now, what does that sound like to you? That's feudal primogeniture. That is, we've reduced ourselves to the residual culture of feudalism, and this is how capitalism is going to develop. If things, I don't know how things are going to accomplish if the working class people can't come together as a group in order to identify and have a peaceful, organized boycott of these, using the last remnants of their only power that they have, their buying power, to vote with their pocketbooks. Then these corporations are gonna go berserk and take as much as they can. The robber barons, and I mean, the Fox News pundits and conservativists are going to fight. They're basically the shills of the capitalist oligarchs. They pray and bow to them like they're some sort of a given god because of this ideology of capitalism being some sort of a religion. It's become a religion, and we can't it's hard. You'd have to deprogram people, and that's very difficult. The conservatives believe in it wholeheartedly, and the liberals believe in communism wholeheartedly, and neither of these function. There has to just be a radical reformation of capitalism in order for us to be able to stop this from happening. But because the lobbying and the special interests have got more power than the majority of people, this is going to happen. This thing that Shad Sullivan's talking about, go watch his video, his rant. This thing that he's talking about, the wastefulness of this, and bringing in lesser quality food products in order to maintain the price or the demand or whatever, in regards to the supply. It's going to happen. There's nothing that we could do about it. We're powerless. This is not a free system. We're meant to perceive it as a free system, but it's not. Inherently, it's not a free system. There's a monopolization. There's no competition. Yeah, 85%. We have four processors, is what he says, harvest 85% of the chain. It's a capitalist oligarchy. We can't use our buying power because we can't come together as a community. And so that's why I think that this Shad Sullivan's rant is going to be, it falls on deaf ears. Nothing's going to come of it. It doesn't matter. The massive corporations will do what they want with us, with the food supply, and it's a sad thing, but follow me at the Working Class Guru, subscribe, and let's create an identity for the working class people to traditionalize, to create their own customs, to segregate from the capitalist ideologies, and to create a peaceful society where we can leverage our power against the minority of oligarchs. Okay? That's all I'm asking. I'm not asking for massive uprising. Just peaceful. What powers we have, we should be using. Okay. Thank you. Like and subscribe. Help the algorithm, and go to workingclassguru.com.